Hi everybody. Today we are going to be talking about using figurative language during our writing. Specifically, this applies to creative writing, though adding in figurative language in essay writing is not a bad idea either. But this specifically for our purposes today, will be talking specifically about creative writing. All right, let's jump in. So what is figurative language? Figurative language is language that should not, let me get my pen out, should not be taken literally, but uses figures of speech to convey meaning. So the figures of speech that we're going to focus on today, there are lots of them, let me just say that, but the four that we're going to talk about today spell an acronym of SPAM: similes, personification, alliteration, and metaphor. Similes, I think you guys probably know all of these already, but let's just do a quick review. Similes are comparisons using like or as. Personification is applying human characteristics to non-human things. Alliteration is the repetition of beginning sounds, specifically consonant sounds, but there are other sounds you can repeat as well. And then metaphors are direct comparisons where you don't actually use like or as in making the comparison. So let's jump. The reason we want to use figurative language in our writing is because it adds a depth of meaning to our writing. It makes it more, it gives readers more opportunity to engage and understand what you're trying to say. So if you say, my sister is grumpy in the morning, okay, that's good. But if you say my sister is a bear in the morning, that gives you a much better sense of what that grumpiness entails. She's angry, she's big, she's kind of huffing around, she's in everybody's way. She doesn't care if she makes you mad, right? And so figurative language is one of the coolest tools that authors use to more fully explain something without using extra words, because they pull in all of these different comparisons and connections that we as a society are familiar with. So let's jump in and see how the author of The Hunger Games, this is Suzanne Collins, how she uses figurative language. Okay, we're going to look at two different examples. The first one we'll do together, and the second one I want you guys to do on your own or with a partner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the example that I've got, and then as I go, I'm going to underline or indicate various figurative language that I come across. Okay, so this is from page 29 of The Hunger Games, so towards the beginning. When I passed the baker's, the smell of fresh bread was so overwhelming I felt dizzy. The ovens were in the back, and a golden glow, there's alliteration, spilled out the open kitchen door. Out, the open is alliteration in two. I stood mesmerized by the heat and the luscious scent until the rain interfered, running its icy fingers down my back, forcing me back to life. That's personification, because rain doesn't actually have fingers. I lifted the lid, there's alliteration again. I lifted the lid to the baker's trash bin, and found it spotlessly, heartlessly bare. So again, lots of really good figurative language. There's a lot of alliteration actually, right? The bakers with their bread, the golden glow, out the open kitchen door. I stood mesmerized by the heat and luscious scent. This isn't technically alliteration, but you do have a repeated sound. Even though luscious, that S sound isn't at the beginning, the luscious scent does kind of tie them together. Rain, running, icy fingers down my back, forcing me back to life. Life, lifted, lid, right? Baker's bin, bear. All of this alliteration ties the scene together and helps. It also helps the reader, even subconsciously, pay attention to those words, because it gives the text a rhythm, so that when they're reading, they kind of almost are like put into this a little bit of a trance, in that they are so into the scene that it's almost like they're right there with him. The other thing that I want to point out, this example of icy fingers down my back, that's a great example of personification. But there's one other thing that this passage actually does very well, and that is bring in something called imagery. Now, I actually have a whole nother video, a whole nother station right here in our writer's workshop that focuses on imagery, but I feel like I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the imagery in this particular example because it's so great. And so let me just, I'm going to change the color of my pen real fast and talk about imagery. So what imagery is description that appeals to your senses. So sight, smell, taste, touch, and hear, right? And so there are lots of really good images here that bring the reader in and help them more fully and more deeply engage with the text through these senses. Okay, so when I passed the bakers, the smell of fresh bread was so overwhelming I felt dizzy. The ovens were in the back and a golden glow spilled out the kitchen door. Okay, so we've got smell, now we've got sight. I stood mesmerized by the heat. Okay, that's feel. And the luscious scent, again, there's smell again, until the rain interfered, running its icy fingers down my back. So that's feel, forcing me back to life. I lifted the lid to the baker's trash bin and found it spotlessly, heartlessly bare. So that's sight again. So all of these different appeals to your senses, again, make the reader more fully, more deeply engage with the text. Makes it feel like you're there. You don't just say the bakery smelled good. You say you can smell the fresh bread because the reader has smelled fresh bread before, and now all of a sudden they can put themselves in the scene because they know exactly what the character is smelling, etc. All right, this is another example from the Hunger Games. It cuts off at the end, and I don't know why. So I'm just going to add in really quick what it says at the end. Hold on really fast. Let me just move that up a little bit. And then I'm just going to add in this final line. So it says, like the flat round discs of hard candy, we could never afford, is how that ends. Okay. So again, what I want you guys to do is, with the other members of our class that are sitting around watching this video, I want you guys to pull out the various types of figurative language you can find in this particular passage. I'm going to read it, and as I read, you're welcome to stop the video. You can talk to each other, work together to see if you can pull out these different examples. Okay. The train finally begins to slow, and suddenly bright light floods the compartment. We can't help it. Both Peta and I run to the window to see what we've only seen on television. The capital, the ruling city of Panem. The cameras haven't lied about its grandeur. If anything, they have not quite captured the magnificence of the glistening buildings in a rainbow of hues that tower into the air, the shining cars that roll down the wide paved streets, the oddly dressed people with bizarre hair and painted faces who have never missed a meal. All the colors seem artificial, the pinks too deep, the greens too bright, the yellows painful to the eyes, like the flat round discs of hard candy we could never afford. Okay, so there's lots of really good examples in here. There's a simile, there's again some more alliteration, some more personification, and I want you guys to see if you can pull it out on your own. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video if you need to, talk amongst yourselves, pull out various examples. You can also talk about imagery because the imagery in this example is excellent as well. And then we're going to move on. All right, this slide and the next is going to give you two pictures. And your goal as the activity for this video is to actually apply what you've learned about figurative language and how to use it in your writing. So this picture, it looks like a messy bedroom, looks like it's maybe a girl's bedroom. What you're going to do is you're going to pretend that this is part of the setting of your story. Come up with statements about this picture, one for each of the 4 types of figurative language we've talked about. Okay, so come up with a simile, an example of personification, alliteration, and metaphor that applies specifically to this picture. you are good to go ahead and pause the video. You're going to do this in the text box that's provided underneath this Canvas assignment. And then there's actually another slide where you're going to do the same thing. So in total, you will have 8 sentences, 2 that have similes, 2 that have personification, 2 for alliteration, 2 for metaphor. 4 of those sentences are going to apply to this picture, and then 4 of them are going to apply to the next picture. So go ahead, pause the video, write your 4 sentences. You can still work together if you want to, but everyone must do their own activity. When you are ready, go ahead and unpause and move on to the next picture. So here's the next. Again, you're going to pretend that this is part of the setting of your story. You're going to come up with statements about this picture, one for each of the types of figurative language we've talked about. Again, so simile, personification, alliteration, metaphor. Remember that acronym of SPAM. So again, 4 more sentences that apply specifically to this picture. All right. And once you have done that, you guys are done with figurative language. I strongly encourage you to take what you've learned and apply it specifically to your writing. Go through and see where you can add in comparisons using metaphors or similes, where you can put in some alliteration or some personification to help your reader more fully engage and more deeply engage and understand what you're trying to say on a deeper level, which is what figurative language is all about. Okay, I expect to see some figurative language in your writing.